legend attributed to those indigenous to what is now the United States of America suggested that the black man had been left in the oven for too long. The white man had not been in the oven long enough, but the red man had come out just the right color. The Greek myth involving Phaethon, the son of Helios, who asked his father if he could drive the sun chariot, and while doing so lost control of it. Burning parts of Africa has been employed to explain the variations in skin pigmentation within the human family. Even the story of the leper whose skin was made clean has also been used to imply that socially colored black skin is the preferred and natural appearance of humanity, while white skin is lacking in color and in need of a cure. Those socially defined as white were referred to as the pale race, and their skin was viewed as leprous. However, according to the U.S. National Library of Medicine, leprosy causes skin sores, nerve damage, and muscle weakness that gets worse over time. It is caused by the bacterium Mycobacterium leprae. This is leprosy, its symptoms and cause. This was written by Starlette Thomas, race abolitionist. The problem with the above excerpt is a simple one. In her attempt to ignore the existence of what Christ called the nations, or ethnos, she has effectively turned a blind eye and deaf ear to a rather plausible possibility. One having recessive genetic traits is not equivalent to being in need of a cure, so that's a false equivalency. One can be imperfect, as we all are in some way imperfect. Every human is in some way physically imperfect, and it does not mean that we as humans are spiritually, intellectually, or otherwise inferior simply because of these mandatory shared imperfections. I also find fault in her willingness to receive answers about ancient tribal makeup from secular academics of the Freemasonic variety. I do not believe that leprosy, as it is shown today, is understood the way that it was understood in the time of the prophet known as Moses, nor do I believe it to be the source of the sole creation of the so-called white race. But I do understand that, out of his infinite wisdom, the Father of Abraham gives all peoples a thorn to bear in their flesh, also known as an imperfection. And whatever else we may disagree on as we look through a glass dimly into antiquity, we can agree that in Scripture the separation of lepers from the Hebrew camps was a mysterious and division-causing event. If the ancient world was dominated by the melaninated, then this curious event also marked the birth of human-on-human segregation, prejudice, and discrimination, aimed at those in the minority who lacked the dominant genetic trait of melanin. I am not isolated in having my doubts about the way we interpret this biblical phenomenon, nor am I alone in viewing the story of the nations as having descended from the sons of Noah differently than the appointed authorities of academia and theology view said story. I believe that there are many pieces of this puzzle that remain hidden by the secret societies that control the flow of ancient esoteric info. It is a trying, bumpy, and narrow path that leads to the perfected fellowship of Galatians 3:28. And to get there, we have to be men and women enough to resist the urge to deflect, deny, or neglect getting some facts straight. In this devilish, bizarro world, hermetic inversions serve as a source of division and confusion, so much so that people will disregard genetics and even history to avoid being loosed from their strong delusion. The Luciferian elite control the narrative. They scrub the facts, cook the books, and whitewash the pictures of ancient people groups, all in order to keep a reason for racial division, and to specifically rock our white brothers and sisters to sleep, enchanted by a spell of assumed supremacy, reinforced by everything considered good in the very society in which they live. They've even been reassigned the classification of white, a misnomer if one ever existed, as no people are white or black, and we all know that. We may use the term in these presentations for the purpose of universal understanding and communication, but we know full well that the terms white and black are taken directly from the chessboard and applied to the contrived game of racism. Though this is a game, it is one that has deadly consequences and a horrific history with no winners. It is a game that can only be played on the young, the spiritually immature, and the insecure, those who struggle the most with spirits of jealousy, bitterness, resentment, denial, pride, and prejudice. For those who believe that Scripture points to the sons of Noah as the origin of certain people groups, the part that is too often missed is that people groups today are generally lighter than they were in ancient times. Ancient Egyptians from Ham, ancient Asians from Japheth, as well as ancient Shemites would have all been people of dark skin. I have seen the pictures which were a lot more easily found before the domination of the internet as our primary source of information. The most basic understanding of genealogy still reflects the fact that Caucasian, light or melanin-less skin does not produce dark-skinned or melanated ethnic groups. However, reality reflects that the reverse is still true. There's no need for a logical individual to deny that, unless, of course, that individual is thoroughly brainwashed by and indoctrinated into believing the hermetic illusion that the adversary has cast upon them. There are no white people in God's creation. The lack of melanin is simply a genetic recessive trait, as are blue eyes and blonde hair, all of which originally come from out of dominant genetic traits. And why does it matter? How has this affected your worldview or the worldview of your children? In order to reach that great Galatians 3:28 state, we have to stop trying to equate truth with hate. And we must remember that this is only skin deep, and let's be clear on what it does and does not indicate. It indicates that we are one human race, from one common ancestor, Adam. It does not indicate who is going to heaven or hell, nor does it indicate who has a propensity for doing good or evil. Ancestral curses are real and travel down bloodlines based on cultural practices. Various people groups have developed different names for the same spirits, and some even have a preference for some spirits over others, as we learned from Pastor Win Worley. But we all know that all sin and have fallen short. No language, costume, or custom can substitute for first seeking the kingdom of God and His righteousness. We also know that our Father does not do things backwards, and that He has left some things on earth intact so that we can learn by observing. The ancient things of genealogy that remain true can be seen in plain view, despite hubris men's best efforts. God is still in control and wants certain things to remain observable as a fact, though compromised scholars of this world and the internet may never confirm them. The adversary is skillful in turning things upside down. As our Father is a God of decency and order, our enemy has devised a system of disorder, inversion, and illusion. The very use of recessive physical genetic traits as a standard of physical beauty and perfection, in other words, a promotion of imperfection as perfection, is but one example of this inversion tactic. We are all made imperfect, but can you imagine a world where what is assumed to be normal or the standard for beauty is that people are pygmy-sized, when the truth is that the majority of the world is not? The promotion of what is lacking as what is most desirable creates a strong delusion of dysmorphia in a majority melanated world. The devil is thorough. So he deludes those who once suffered from the discrimination of skin to now take the role of oppressors, or to simply just sit complacently in their seats as their ancestors' indifferent descendants. It's easier to say what we are not than what we are in these last days of Noah. Folks fear what they don't understand and what they feel will take their place. For these reasons, folks fear the rise of AI, and for the same simple anthropological reasons, many folks fear the ghetto and its misaligned inhabitants. Both are examples of false evidence appearing as real. It is our spiritual adversary and his agents that inspire the powers that be to promote partisan politics, to perpetuate systemic racism, and to keep other forms of social division and mass confusion in play. These ancient agents are the ones who encouraged our elders to label themselves as black and to proclaim their darkness proudly. By demonic inspiration, The Psalms chapter 2, verse 2. Kings of the earth used insecurity, pride, and denial to create an imaginary division between men via color of skin. These powers simultaneously sowed self-destructive seeds of lost and stolen identity that caused an entire ethnos to suffer from chronic amnesia. They did so while at this same time exploiting the growing resentment of these elders' disregarded children, offspring which these ancient elders denied simply due to the color of their skin. The spirits of pride, denial, bitterness, and resentment drove such a widening wedge in between the melaninated and non-melaninated members of this family that the breach seems unrepairable even to this day. A great chasm now exists, separating tribes into races, judging each other by the hues of their faces. Our adversaries know the natures of those tribes, what spirits they are predisposed to receiving, where they congregate, and how they generally move. This was exemplified in the Rockstar video game San Andreas. The game's creators showed that elements of the predominant so-called hip-hop culture could actually be programmed, recreated, and exploited by any who chose to do so. And we foolishly celebrate that cultish culture, mindlessly promoting negative stereotypes, thoughtlessly creating self-destructive role models, and degrading ourselves for celebrity, all because we don't know how to collectively beat them, so we join them, and all of it is vanity. But if we insist upon examining the culture of the day, we have to make a few candid observations about how this cult has gotten so far away from its stated original intent and so far out of our collective control. We moved away from the warm and organic, though imperfect, soul music that had encouraged self-expression, reflection, and social awareness during the turbulent 60s and early to mid-1970s into a newly declared era of love, peace, and having fun, spawned from the hypnotic mind control of disco. This era was supposed to be one of self-determination, and a self-defining new art form arose from out of the inspiration of the same spirit that gave America the blues. While the organic aspects of this societal seedling blossomed, the pruning of agent provocateurs and publicly propagated propaganda came to quickly cut away any positive or redeeming aspects of this growing community's unique and dynamic expression. This culture was quickly assimilated into the dominant societal macrocosm. The powers that be knew from lessons learned during the previous decades that the key to a successful takeover was to keep up the illusion that the movement was organic, especially after the powers that should not be had co-opted it. Let's fast forward to examine the climate today, after 50 years of this culture having had its effect on the so-called black community, now that it clearly has the center stage. Our fashion has now become formulaic, rather than an expression of countercultural defiance, one where we had once purposely flipped, ripped, reversed, airbrushed, and re-envisioned the funny-fitting, fruity fashions that dominated American popular culture, all while it isolated the common working man. Through the mimicking of so-called black culture, all of America, even the lower and middle class, could express individualism and identity through a new way to dress for what it was worth. Vanity of vanities, indeed, but still true. The truth cannot simply be the truth, but it must be told, especially if it leads to freedom. As I have closely watched and followed this culture grow around me, even as I grew, I saw its degradation. I saw the shift in the mainstream selection of media hip-hop darlings grow before my eyes. This proverbial persona non gratis, this entity of hip-hop, was suddenly being embraced by the same dominant culture that was clearly terrified of it from its beginning. The insertion of groomed ops like Tupac and the oversaturation of sex and violence through the spotlighting of Luther Campbell and 2 Live Crew, NWA, and the consequent dominance of gangsta rap was, from my perspective, obviously deliberate. I even thought that was true in my 20s, as I saw well thought out and smooth lyricism slowly give way to simple and brash delivery and then I saw simple and brash delivery devolve into daft buffoonery.
Children growing, women producing, men go working, some do stealing. Everyone's got to make a living.
What we're gonna do right here is go back. Way back. Back into time. Back into time. Back
You can't
into
see,
time.
but you may be the way that the powers that be designed you to be. Can't you see? How did we come to be this way? Collectively cursed, a people possessed by the spirit of Shalbriri. As another sits in the Semitic seat they abdicated, because once, with other gods they fornicated, as they today sit. Sightless, yet woke with liberated hair. Gypped and dipped in, the fad of ghetto fabulous Negro Egyptian, placated as their vacated eyes stare into the darkness around them unaware, confined within the bind of the blackness of their mind, visionless as the man born blind in John chapter 9, injected just beneath the epidermis with a certain divine liquid light shine, kept away from the way of ancient Palestine, because Revelation's 2:9 foes fear what those so-called Negroes might find. The Illuminati tempt your human body and brain to desire to remain in a prison playpen. They let you wander and wonder through religions, cementing the immature bitterness mind state that you stay in. The NWO want to control your mind, body, and soul, subconsciously, so that you can't defend it. So today they say, Jesus as a curse word on film, and your congressional dem is now pan-Afrocentric. They point you away from the Messiah and his truer way, steering you always south of the Sahara. Their science will one day confirm the Yoruban Orishas and Santeria from Guantanamara. Their historians point you to days of vainglorious, hinting you to ancestor worship. These devils want you to return to the spirit familiars that came with the slaves on that first ship. Or they lead you to read you are indigenous also, and then all y'all go to worshiping nature, tossed to and fro, blind to the facts. Who rejects their own God-given savior? Stubborn souls, stooping stupid low, and yet you don't know why the other tribes hate you. You say you're the chosen, had a name that was stolen, and maybe you're frozen. Think of how those in power now laugh loud at your behavior. They lie about the letter J, whitewash the Messiah away, and make you say, you are God. Misquoting and misinterpreting Psalm 82:6. Makes you a God that's level with the devil because you're shady, doing tricks, which misrepresents your goodly heritage. Be godly and seek ye first the King. You'll be his royal priest, and from old bonds you'll be released, eyes open, given vision, living hidden within the shadow of his wing.
Can't you see? Nobody small. Perfectly black. So I went into the record store and I saw this album sitting there. And I saw this sharp looking dude on the cover and I say, is that him? The Black Prince? Could I be right? Could that be Kid Dynamite? The Black Prince has arrived. I have arrived here from the ghetto myself. Thank you very much. I'm here on the exchange program. Y'all can imagine what they sent over there. People always ask me about the ghetto. People ask me, hey Jim, how can y'all live in the ghetto?
You're blind, baby.
Here is what sales psychologists have to say about selling to the Negro.
The secret of selling to the Negro is expressed in one word. That word is recognition. Now, there's nothing unusual about that. People want to be recognized. They need recognition. That's basic in all of us. But perhaps because he's had so little of it, the Negro needs even more. He needs to feel important and appreciated. This need is a very real and important one. It shows up even in many of the Negro's shopping habits. Anyone who sells or wants to sell to the Negro customer should know about some of these habits. 3 habits in particular play a big part in every sales transaction. To begin with, most Negroes buy by brand. They ask for products by name. They're quick to turn down off-brands. Buying by brand, that's the first important Negro buying habit. Now for the second. The Negro buys good quality merchandise. Symbols of quality and prestige are very important to the Negro customer. This woman, for example, is buying fine crystalware. But she is also buying the admiration and approval of her friends and relatives. Listen to her thoughts.
My, isn't it beautiful? I can hardly wait to show it to Sally and Joan.
It's a well-known fact that many Negro customers are influenced by the opinions of others. What their friends may think of a certain item often decides whether or not the sale is made. So remember, the Negro buys quality merchandise. That's the second important point. And here's the third thing to remember when selling to a Negro customer. When he specifically asks for one thing, don't try to sell him something else. Don't try to switch him at the point of sale. If you do, he'll probably react something like this.
Doesn't he think I've got the money to pay for it?
The Negro resents being offered a substitute. He wants to be sold on quality, not price. The Negro buys by brand, he buys quality, and he doesn't like to be switched at point of sale. These are the keys to selling the Negro customer.
According to leading researchers, in proportion to population and income, Negroes buy more quality products than any other comparable United States group.
You will not believe all the reports of violence that broke out when people rushed to get the newest pair of Air Jordans. A crowd busted through this door in Indiana. And remember, as you're watching these pictures, this is all over shoes. A few people got trampled. Doors were ripped right off their hinges. The Air Jordan Retro shoes just went on sale early Friday morning.
Can't you see?
Since I was a kid, I've been, working hard just to come up here early in the morning just to wait in line to get these shoes. I was the first person out of everybody that was out here to get these right here.
How many pairs of Air Jordans do you have?
I have about 9 pair of Air Jordans, but it does not matter about those. It matters about these right here.
This was the scene in Kansas City where people were sprinting through the halls. But that's nothing compared to this mall in the Seattle area where people used pepper spray to break up a crowd that was pushing and shoving.
I got burnt, man. Look, it came all over my face. My mouth is on fire.
Look at it, you can see it.
My eye, look. I can't even, if I lick my lips, my mouth will burn.
It was just too hostile, too dangerous. So some pepper spray was used because that definitely gets people's attention.
Part of the problem is that each store has a limited amount of about 150 pairs, and each pair costs about $180, but they resell on eBay for almost $500. People in Georgia say one mom even left her 2- and 5-year-old children in her car while she went shopping. And officers arrested 3 other people for breaking down the mall door during all the chaos. A rep for Nike told USA Today that the company is concerned by the violence and urges everyone to be respectful and safe.
Telecommunications is a field that has its roots deep in the sullied soil of the supernatural and what is known as the occult. Since the word occult means hidden, we can comfortably label the discovery of 3 of our most useful and used pieces of communications technology: the radio, the telephone, and the television, As occult inspired, our focus will be aimed at the television and its reign as the most powerful of these mediums and the most popular today. It is also the most storied. I've heard tales of tenured military men who during visits home would sit their daughters down and explain the way of the world to them, only after they would unplug the television and turn it facing toward the wall. When Bill Cooper explained that the government was using silent weapons for secret wars against its own people, the truther community didn't inspect the most likely suspect. Let's look into the connections between the development of television technology and hidden esoteric knowledge, as well as the spiritual practices that may have influenced it. While some may consider this theory controversial, let us at least consider the possibility that certain aspects of television's history and symbolism suggest a deeper, mystical connection. The occult roots of early inventors. Our journey begins with the pioneers of technology, individuals whose groundbreaking work laid the foundation for modern television. Alexander Graham Bell. Alexander Graham Bell, renowned as the inventor of the telephone, was also a member of the American Society for Psychical Research. This affiliation hints at an interest in paranormal and occult phenomena that extended beyond his famous invention. Proponents of this theory argue that Bell's exploration of communication beyond the physical realm may have influenced his contemporaries in the field of electrical and electronic invention. The boundaries of science and spirituality blurred in their pursuit of knowledge. Guglielmo Marconi. Guglielmo Marconi's fascination with wireless communication led to the development of radio technology, a groundbreaking achievement in its own right. Some proponents suggest that Marconi's experiments in long-distance radio transmission hinted at a desire to connect with otherworldly beings or dimensions through the very electromagnetic waves that would later become the backbone of our modern telecommunication systems. Occult symbolism and television technology. Our next stop on this journey takes us to the heart of television technology and the symbolism that surrounds it. Cathode ray tube, CRT. The cathode ray tube, or CRT, served as a key component of early televisions. What makes it especially interesting is its frequent association with mystical properties. Proponents of this theory suggest that the CRT's use of electron beams may symbolize the harnessing of unseen forces and the manipulation of energy. In essence, television screens could be seen as portals to hidden realms, merging science with the esoteric. Television as a scrying device. Scrying, a divination practice involving gazing into a reflective surface to receive mystical insights, has deep historical roots. Some proponents propose that television screens could be interpreted as modern scrying mirrors, offering viewers access to hidden knowledge or alternate dimensions through their screens. Occult symbols in broadcasting. Our exploration also encompasses the realm of television programming. Conspiracy theorists have pointed to the use of occult symbols and subliminal messages in broadcasts. They claim that these symbols are strategically placed to influence and guide viewers on a subconscious level, drawing upon esoteric symbolism to achieve their aims. The influence of secret societies. No discussion of hidden knowledge is complete without considering the influence of secret societies on technological advancement. Masonic influence. Proponents argue that secret societies like the Freemasons have played a role in shaping technology's evolution. They suggest that Masonic symbolism and rituals may have found their way into the design and development of television, connecting the dots between ancient wisdom and modern innovation. Conclusion. In closing, the theory of an occult history of the television set remains a subject of exploration and debate. While skeptics may raise doubts and assert that the connections between occult practices and television technology are speculative at best, proponents offer compelling symbolism and historical anecdotes to support their claims. Our journey today serves as a reminder that the history of technology is not always a straightforward march of scientific progress. Sometimes, it is intertwined with mystical beliefs, hidden knowledge, and the unexplored territories of the human imagination. As we continue to advance in the digital age, let us remain open to the possibility that there may be more to our inventions than meets the eye.
There was a time when the sea gave way to the sky, and the sky to the sea, raising an amazing city into a destination like no other.
Welcome to Atlantis, the third.
Do you not think an angel rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm? This work continues. The story goes on. And an angel still rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm. God bless you all, and God bless America.
And do you realize that those who taught you that this was a Christian-run nation were dead wrong?
We're sick and tired of your ism, schism, game, dine and go to heaven in Jesus' name, Lord. We know when we understand, Almighty God is a living man. You can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time. So now we see the light. We gonna stand up for right.
Now prayer is not welcome in school, or not welcome just about anywhere, regardless of how you feel about it. Don't folks have the right to do it if they'd like? And dying and going to heaven at all has not been the concern of a generation that's been turned toward the brightness of the false light. A generation seeking after a sign, wicked and adulterous and blind as the man in John chapter 9. The FBI and alphabet agencies keep files on their operatives too. Compromised men who gain power and popularity would go rogue if left unwatched. He too was used to spread the doctrine of devils via Aleister Crowley's Do As Thou Wilt, Jamaican style. If there were ever any real files on Marley, it was to keep close watch and ensure that he did not grow weary or become contrite and reveal the secret of the brotherhood, the serpent's seed. The true rulers of ancient Atlantis, inhabitants of the deep. There is an angel guiding this whirlwind too. Today, every time you look up, you see some kingly-haired, young, bright-eyed, partially assimilated, code-switching spokesperson, skinning and grinning in skinny jeans and denim, hip-hopping across the television screen like the proverbial white rabbit in Wonderland. I know it's hard to believe, but not too long ago, we as an ethnos, or ethnic group, saw very few images that reflected our likeness on television, stage, and screen. I can recall the racial impressions that seared into my young subconscious mind. It was clear to me, at an early age even, that white people had fun, loving, and glamorous existences. They were softer spoken. They seemed much more sure and assertive, unlike the images I commonly saw of loud, pushy, ignorant blacks whose mispronounced words almost always were followed by uproarious laughter. And that often at their own expense. No one had to sit me down and explain these misperceived ideas to me. My mama and daddy would have never taught me such a skewed perspective. I didn't get these ideas from my teachers, and certainly not from my granddaddy Jackson. This distorted view of reality was directly taught to me via the TV. These were lessons that I had learned through staring into the disorienting lens of the Cyclops that so many of our southern ancestors called the one-eyed devil. And there was once a time when the presence of that electric altar of death, that is the centerpiece of every living room, brought the family household together to receive its transmissions willingly and openly. This portable temple of Set that we used to call the TV set was also the source of much of the daily information that Americans were consuming. A newspaper was usually read and then discarded or used for wrapping fish, while movie-going is generally seen as a weekend outing. Therefore, they would decide to use extra strength, but periodic programming via subliminal messages in movies. Intelligence agencies had long beforehand seized control of Hollywood, according to reliable sources, documents, and their own modern admissions of collusion, coercion, and infiltration. The Luciferian elite will never admit it, but network television stations were also under the same control. If we can agree and come to that conclusion that television would have been just as important to control by the powers that should not be as the movie and film industry once were, then we can fill in some missing blanks concerning the negative self-images of ourselves that we alone perpetuate at the present date. You see, with TV, the elite saw that they had an opportunity to feed the masses of sheeple daily doses of carefully curated propaganda, which could be sent directly through the television and into their readily receiving little minds. With the occult-inspired invention of the vision caster, propaganda and messages from the elite could reach a family's living room at any and all desired times. What was even more ensnaring about this modern crystal ball was the fact that people would be drawn both to and into this box by way of their flesh and pride. It would affect the subconscious minds and emotions not as a byproduct, but by intentional design. And broadcast television was able to both broadly cast as well as receive a vision.
it Black Jesus.
Black Jesus. Now this is what the brothers need. Groovy, super, heavy.
Relax, Michael. It's only a painting, not the second coming.
What's happening? Nothing. Hey, Don, how you like this? What is it? Don't show your ignorance. This is Black Jesus. Black Jesus, my foot. That's never wino. JJ, you sure know how to pick your models or wino Jesus?
It's only a symbol of Jesus.
Hey, JJ, you should enter this into the exhibit.
No way. Now, Sweet Daddy Williams here is one of a kind. Just a few finishing touches, and he's gonna be ready for Black history.
Sure is a shame to keep this in the closet. Hey, since both are just symbols of Jesus, a black family should have a black symbol.
If Mama sees that there, she gonna kill you. Jesus may have your soul, but Mama gonna have your behind. Go on now, baby.
Stack magazine down and get in that kitchen and clean it out.
I don't have to ask who hung this here, Michael Evans, but before I hang you in its place, why?
Mama, it's just a symbol of Jesus.
Well, hello, symbol, and goodbye.
Mama, couldn't we at least let Black Jesus hang alongside?
Forget it. The only Jesus I know is him, and the one thing he don't need is a partner.
Mama, how do we know Jesus wasn't black? He could have been from the lost tribe of Israel. They were supposed to be black.
I bet they were. If ever people were lost, we're it. If ever people were lost, we're it. If ever people were lost, we're it.
Now just watch out, both of you.
This picture has been in my family for as long as I can remember. When I was a baby, I don't know what I saw first. My mama, my papa, or this Jesus. Now he's the one I know and love, so let's close the subject. Jesus was black, the Bible would have said so.
But it does say so.
What are you talking about?
I read about it, it's in Revelation chapter 1, verse 14. I read about it in Muhammad's speech.
You and your smile.
His hair is like wool, and his eyes are like flame of fire.
Well, Lord have mercy. It sure do say that, don't it?
And see, Mama, look at her hair, like wool, ain't it? And look at them eyes, red like fire.
Yeah, they sure is. Judy, how come you decided to paint this?
I don't know. All of a sudden, I just had divine thoughts on my mind.
And for JJ, that's a first.
What, having divine thoughts?
No, having a mind.
I guess I ought to be grateful for JJ having Jesus on his mind in any color. I ought to be grateful for JJ having Jesus on his mind in any color. I ought to be grateful for JJ having Jesus on his mind in any color.
Then we can hang him on the wall, Mama?
Well, now,
please, Mama.
All right. But just for Black History Week. After that, he comes down.
Good. I'll go get it. Look for it.
Michael, did you know this was Ned DeWino?
Sure. But that's not important. It's just a symbol.
It is important. Black History Week or no Black History Week. He's coming down off that wall and out of this house. Take him down. Have no fear because Santa Claus is here. Mama, this is for you. And that's for my little man. You ready? Set, hut, hut. JJ, here you go, man.
Hey, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, cool, a new pair of sneakers.
Guess what you need for your next protest march, huh? Too much! I may wear these outside my clothes. James, I want to know where you got the money. I love having a coat to keep me warm, but I don't want one that's hot. It comes right from the Internal Revenue. I thought you owed them. I did, and I paid them out of what they owed me. I tell you, Floyd, I can't believe it. It's like we all of a sudden got a miracle. you got some money back from the Internal Revenue don't mean he had anything to do with it.
Baby, I don't know what you got against Black Jesus, there.
Nothing, except I got a lifetime contract with the real one here.
Maybe you ought to hold out for one season, see if he comes up with better terms.
James, that is pure blasphemy, and I'm not going to have you talking that way in this house.
I'll tell you something, baby. If this painting here brings Junior as much luck as it brought me, you can start fixing that victory dinner right now.
Oh, James, one lucky break don't mean a thing.
Hey, Ma! Dad! You'll never guess. Something I always wanted. What is it? You know Larry Williams? He asked me to go to the Isaac Hayes concert tonight. Oh, Ma, can I go?
That's all right with me.
Okay. Thanks, Ma. I'm so happy. This is my lucky day.
It still don't mean a thing.
It don't, huh? Looks to me like Black Jesus is doing his thing real good.
Thelma going to an Isaac Hayes concert don't exactly compare to the miracle of the loaves and the fishes. James, you know that's just another coincidence. Anyway, you promised you wouldn't gamble.
This ain't gambling. With this dude blowing on the dice, ain't no chance of me crapping out.
I got something to tell you.
Is it good news?
Yeah.
Don't tell me.
What's happening, Wilona?
Well, that good luck hanging there is seeping right through the walls into my apartment. I just got a call from the octopus asking me for another date. I just found out he owns a gas station.
You can't get him too, huh, Wilona? I just hit the...
Don't you two understand? It's still just a few other coincidences.
I just got found out.
Oh, no!
Well, what you got to say now, woman?
Just one thing. I've had it with everybody believing in this. Ned DeWino is going back to the closet. Let him perform his miracle of the mothballs.
No, like Jesus is going back up on the wall where he's going to continue to perform the miracle of the Evans family.
James, you...
Now, that's final, baby. Now, look here, Florida. You got any other explanation for all this good luck we've been having?
Yes, I have.
What?
Has it ever occurred to you that this is the first time this family sat down for more than 5 seconds discussing the Lord? Maybe that's why all your good things are happening.
Now, look, baby, I'm not putting down what you believe in, but I also ain't giving up the first good thing I ever had going for me.
All you got going for you is superstition.
Now, you call it what you want, but baby, it's working. And with Black Jesus' help, baby, I can work myself up to foreman, then plant manager, then owner of the factory. No, that's asking too much, huh? I'll settle for foreman, BJ.
When you go on that job interview tomorrow, I'll be praying for you.
Baby, you can pray all you want. Now, he ain't gonna hurt, but he's gonna help.
What's the noise? Did I tell you?
Hey, Junior, how'd it go? I didn't even enter, huh? When I got there, 8 other dudes had a painting of unique Sweet Daddy Williams.
Hey, JJ, did anybody have a painting like this?
Oh.
Like I told you in the first place, this is the one you should enter. The Pan-African Council would really dig it.
Well, wait a minute, Junior. You ain't rented that in the exhibit.
But Dad, it's his best shot.
Yeah, well, it's my best shot, too, son. Now, I need him here, Junior. He's made things happen for me. Now, you got a lot of other paintings, son. There must be something else you can enter. Nothing else is good. Yeah, well, you're going to have to find something, Junior, because my luck ain't leaving this wall. No, Mom. Maybe Thelma's right. We ought to get off thinking I could win a prize anyway. Need a whole bunch of talent and training for that. I ain't even close. And now, you hold on just 1 minute, Junior. You my son. And the last thing I ever want to hear you doing is running down your own thing. Now, painting is your thing, ain't it? Well, I want it to be. Well, all right, then. Paint on.
What you gonna do, Jim?
Look, I know what I'm doing. Just let me deal with this. Here, son. You take this down to the art show and you take it down there proud. Because you got just as much chance of winning as any of the rest of them cats. But what about your luck? Junior, that's your paint. It ain't mine. I ain't got no right to it. Well, don't just sit there with your butt glued to the chair, man. Get up and get to stepping. Let's go. Thanks, Dad. All right.
Don't that make you feel good?
Yeah, baby. But you know what made me feel a whole lot better if I'd have waited another half hour before I got rid of Black Jesus?
For what?
By then, the results would be in from the last race in Hialeah. Hey, Junior. How'd it go? I lost.
Oh, son, I'm sorry.
That's all right, Mama. Van Gogh wasn't famous till after he was dead. I ain't even lost an ear yet. Wait a minute, Junior. Put him back in the closet. Huh? Oh, he ain't brought you no luck. I think Black Jesus' winning streak is over. Okay.
Put him back on the wall, JJ.
Huh? You mean that, baby?
We might as well have both of them up there. With this family, we can use all the help we can get.
Say, children, what does it all mean?
let me take you on a journey through the turbulent waters of history and the dire warnings it holds for our future. The year was 1967, and Detroit, Michigan, was a city ablaze with discontent. The 1967 Detroit riots were not just an isolated incident, but a harbinger of the storms brewing across our nation, signaling a profound message that echoes through the corridors of time. Historians have long acknowledged that the 1967 Detroit riot was not merely a violent episode, but a manifestation of deep-seated issues that had been festering for years, simmering in the shadows of neglect. The ghetto, a place of hardship and suffering, had historically been forsaken by those in power, left to wither away like a forgotten relic. And here lies the crux of our dilemma. The problems of the ghetto have an uncanny way of spilling over, transcending their boundaries to infiltrate areas far beyond their confines. Scholars have eloquently put it, the problems of the ghetto have historically turned into problems faced in areas beyond and outside of the ghetto. This phenomenon, my friends, is not unique to Detroit. It is a recurring theme that is played out in cities across our land. The apathy towards the inner city, the negligence that we have allowed to persist, has sowed the seeds of inevitable decline. Politicians, too, have recognized this truth. Decades of neglect and indifference towards the inner city have created a breeding ground for unrest and discontent. We cannot ignore the fact that our collective indifference has fueled the flames of discontent, setting the stage for turmoil that reaches far beyond the boundaries of the ghetto. In the aftermath of the 1967 Detroit riots, a song emerged, a haunting reminder of the war zone-like conditions within the ghetto. The World is a Ghetto captured the essence of the struggle, a battle fought not with conventional weapons, but with the chains of poverty, inequality, and systemic injustice. The lyrics resonated with a cry for help and a plea for action. As we reflect upon these historical lessons, I implore those residing in the ghetto and those living beyond its borders to heed the warnings that Detroit has etched into the annals of time. Research has shown that cities willing to invest in their inner cities, addressing the root causes of poverty and inequality, stand stronger and more resilient in the face of unrest and violence. But it is not just about statistics and research. It is about a higher calling. Let us turn to the sacred words of Scripture, for they offer a profound indictment of our indifference. In the King James Version, Matthew 25:40 reminds us, "And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily, I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me." Christian indifference to the plight of those in the ghetto contradicts the very essence of our faith. As I stand here today, I see Detroit not just as a metaphor, but as a prophetic omen for the path that our shared nation and the world that we influence is treading. The decline of Detroit serves as a stark reminder of the consequences that await if we continue to turn a blind eye to the suffering of our fellow citizens. It is time to unplug from indifference, to stand united, and to rewrite the future with compassion and equity as our guiding stars. Beloved listeners, let us not dismiss these warnings as mere conspiracy theories, but as vital truths that demand our immediate attention and action. The time to change our course is now, for the decline of Detroit is but a harbinger of what awaits us all if we fail to rise to the occasion.
Self-destruction! We're headed for self-destruction!
A dynamite!
WWJ News Special, 6 days in July. the film record of how WWJ News covered the events of this critical week in Detroit history.
Grandma, your generation believed in talk, scared of the very steps in which you walked. Hey, all the listen to all that was said, until depression set in, leaving mouths unfed. And then you came along and tried to use your own head and think another way. Oh, but the thought was deep within your mind that you would soon be free one day. But it was just a mere thought, because you decided to lay. Then came me with a brand new thing and all types of different views. And after you rejected me, we became the front page news. We were fighting, crying, dying, bleeding for a cause. We wanted freedom, justice, and equality. These were our laws. Let me tell you this.
Recently made arrangements, I should say recently within the last 45 minutes or hour, that an additional 200 state policemen will be brought in to our command post to assist our normal complement of police that's out there. It isn't a normal complement. We have the men, as you know, on 12-hour shifts. I want to emphasize, though, that there hasn't been shooting out there. There has been an effort, and I think to a degree a successful effort, not as successful as we'd like it, however, by the police department to maintain law and order.
As Governor of the State of Michigan, I do hereby officially request the immediate deployment of federal troops into Michigan to assist state and local authorities in reestablishing law and order in the city of Detroit. I am joined in this request by Jerome P. Kavanaugh, Mayor of the city of Detroit.
We're here at the request of Governor Romney. We're about to go downtown and meet with him and with Mayor Kavanaugh and to discuss such specific plans for support and assistance as may be required.
Law and order have broken down in Detroit, Michigan. Pillage, looting, murder, and arson have nothing to do with civil rights.
after I was shot, I just fell to, right to the pavement because I didn't know how many shots were coming off after that.
Were you bewildered or angry or what?
I don't think it's right for my people to act the way that they're acting. This is all I can say about the thing because we're fighting one war now in Vietnam and we're losing, as it is. So, I mean, why should we come back here and fight a war among ourselves?
Began in the early hours of Sunday a week ago at what used to be the Economy Printing Company. The building is up for sale. The location is just north of 12th and Claremont on the near west side. Police had it under surveillance for several weeks. In the early hours of Sunday morning last, they raided the premises and discovered an after-hours drinking establishment, commonly called a blind pig. 80 persons were arrested. Police escorted them to paddy wagons. A group of curious bystanders congregated. Their curiosity turned to hostility. They began shouting their disapproval. Empty bottles began to fly. Several store windows were shattered. Garbage cans were upended and the contents set on fire. The bystanders began to help themselves to the unprotected merchandise in the store windows. By daylight, a handful of looters had collected size and momentum, like a rolling snowball. This was the scene at 12th and at Claremont.
At this point, were the police very worried, George?
Yes, I'm sure they were. They must have been. It appeared they couldn't control the situation.
Does anybody realize the immensity of this thing? Had this realization?
I don't think so. I'm sure that nobody had at this point.
This is Herman Kiefer Hospital, where police set up command headquarters. It's 4 blocks from the 4-block area where the rioting started. Of course, many accounts of personal suffering and tragedy will come out of Detroit's ordeal by fire and bullets. We'll be hearing those for weeks, months, even years to come.
In the daylight is when you can see those fires.
A personal tragedy, perhaps that of little Tonya Blandings, will rank as the most poignant. It was early Wednesday morning, the 4th day, when a bullet went through a window of her home. She was killed in the very beginning of her life, just 3 years old.
We help try to keep the riots down and keep the corner clear. But after all, what can we do? What can you say behind all this murdering and confusion? I wish that the things could be better for the Negro people. Everybody isn't thieves and murderers and snipers.
I was driving my friend home and they started shooting and that was it. I mean, we both work at Ford truck drivers and I worked Monday and they sent us home Monday at 7 o'clock on account we supposed to be off the street at 9, so he worked Tuesday and because he worked day shift, you see. So I'm driving home and they just started shooting at us.
This was sniper fire.
I guess it was, I don't know what it was. I guess I thought it was them guards. I mean, they were shooting.
Did you see anything as you were driving into the area, or just?
Yeah, well, see, I come up to this stop street, and they started shooting. So I asked my friend, I said, man, what they want us to do? He said, they want us to turn around. I started backing up, and they thought, oh, we over my fired in.
We didn't, the guard did not go into, I'm looking just from a soldier viewpoint at this time. The guard did not go into the Detroit to be big bad boys of summer or to be the conquering military force. We went in there to protect the citizens of Detroit. We didn't go in there to destroy the citizens. Or we went in to protect the property, to protect the firemen, the policemen, the utility workers, and to protect the people so they would have a city. A majority of the guard was from the city of Detroit. Detroit feeds the entire surrounding community here, always has. And a lot of people that were downtown, a lot of guardsmen, they were from the city of Detroit. And it was their home, and they were there to protect their own home. That's what we were there for. And that's what the greatest majority of us saw our mission was, is to protect citizens in the city.
We were not out there looting. It was just average people on the streets, the ones who were so-called looting. We called it taking rather than stealing, taking back some of the things that we deserved and never got. So it was called taking. And so the people in the community were taking some of the things that they did not have the opportunity to get. Well, they took them because they felt that they had been oppressed, that these things had been gained from them illegally in the first place, that prices were too high, that merchants were gouging the people in the community, and so they took it out on them. And they didn't feel that they were stealing anything or looting anything, merely that they were taking back some of the things that they should have gotten in the first place. At night, there were people who were going out doing more revolutionary type activities. These people were community people. They were people who lived in the neighborhoods. They were not members of our organization by and large, or the organizations that were a part of the revolutionary movement. These were just spontaneous movements on the part of people in the community. I met a group of brothers who lived on Linwood near Davison, and they told me that every night they went out and with their guns, and they shot at police and National Guardsmen, and they would drive back. They cut all the lights off, and they thought it was quite exciting what they were doing, and they felt that they were doing something to help the people. But in terms of black consciousness, they had very little of that. We came into the city about 3 a.m. that morning, and it was a rather eerie feeling that we had, because no one was on the streets. I mean, it was just deserted, and we were concerned. We didn't know, what was happening with our families. We didn't know the extent of the riot that first day, and so we were able to get home early that morning, and of course, the next day the riot was on again. The next day I went to the bookstore, and I just felt that nothing would be wrong with my store, at least from the people, and of course I was correct. And there were revolutionary slogans written all across the windows, long live the black revolution, and assalamu alaikum, and those kind of terms were written on the windows of the building. There were 4 units, and my store was one of those units, and there were revolutionary slogans all across there. So it was something that was, good for me. I enjoyed seeing that. And of course I went in, and it was business as usual in the bookstore, even a little more. People began to come in because everyone was trying to compare notes and to try to find out what was going to happen next. I came to the bookstore 2 days later, and I noticed that the windows had been broken out, noticed that the pictures had been damaged on the wall, and as I was inspecting the damage, some of the neighbors came over and told me that the Detroit Police Department had done that damage. And I noticed that they were especially interested in busting the faces of some of the more well-known blacks who were on the wall, like Stokely Carmichael, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr. And so I said, well, what am I going to do? So I called the police department. First of all, I called the mayor's office, and the mayor told me to call the police. I said, well, the police did it. And so he said, well, call them anyway. So then I called the 10th precinct, and the sergeant in charge, who told me his name was Sergeant Slaughter, said that, yeah, we did it. We did it before, and we'll do it again. And he said that the reason we did it is because we heard you guys were storing guns in the store. And he said, we don't intend to have any of that. And I know you guys are the ones who started the riots. And sure, we did it, and we'll do it again. And he wasn't lying, because the next night they came back. They broke in again, knocked all of the boards off, and plugged up the sink, turned on the water, and knocked all the books off the wall and waterlogged all of my books in about 8 inches of water. And that's what I found the next day I came into the bookstore.
Oh, yes, it did, because there were some supermarkets in the neighborhood that didn't sell products weren't very good. They sold bad meats. Their stores weren't clean as they could be. And then there were other stores like the A&P market was well kept. They had nice food. Their food was good. Their prices were right. But so you expected, I expected, that the Bilo supermarket was going to be burned down. If they were going to burn down a supermarket, Bilo's was one of the ones that was going to go, because it was rotten. To me, their products were terrible. Their store wasn't kept as clean as it could be. And I went in there on one occasion, and I got to bad meat that I had to return. And after that, I just stopped shopping there. And I just knew that Bilo's was going to be a market that was going to be burned. And the A&P might have been looted, but it didn't get burned.
Oh, I got my kids ready for church, for Sunday school rather, and the bus came. They walked from Highland and we lived on Highland, and they walked from Highland and 14 to Linwood in Highland to catch the church bus, and they went to school. And so when my daughter got to church, she called back and said, "Mama, it's Judgment Day." I said, "What you mean?" She said, "Everything is burning." I said, "Why?" She said, "They say there's a riot going on." And I almost had a fit behind it. And I was worried until they brought them back home after church. So they come home, thank God, in one piece. Now, when the children came home from church, they was telling me how so many things was burned up on coming home, what they saw on the bus coming from church. And I said, "Well, the best thing we can do is stay in the house." And they said, "Well, we going to back out." I said, "I don't think y'all should go nowhere because it's too bad out there." So I was very much concerned. I told my husband he couldn't go to work. We all had to just stay there in the house. So when the troops came in and they was riding those trucks, look what you call them, with the guns on them, up and down the streets, and they housed them over on Central High School playground. That's where they were. And they was up and down that street all night and all day going. When they come down 12th Street, 12th Street is one way going north. And they would turn when they get to Highland and go back over to Central High School to the parking lot where they was housed at. So, and the guys, they'll say, "Get off the porch." And so, people on the porch, they run in the house. So that's the way that went. It was very devastating watching all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we were coming from the Black Power Conference in Newark, myself and two other brothers, and we heard on the radio that the riot was on in Detroit. And, of course, we were very concerned about it because, our families were here, and we didn't quite know exactly what to do. However, we were not surprised that the riot came, because we knew that the unrest was there. It was seething. It had always been there. And we were not surprised that it happened, but we were concerned about our families. And we were detained in Toledo, about 46 miles from Detroit, for about 3.5 hours. And then we were allowed to go into Detroit early that morning around 3 a.m. We went in on back roads, and we were able to get to our homes safely. And, of course, the next day, the riot was on again. Well, in 1963, when Malcolm came to Detroit, we were just beginning to organize a community. A few of the sisters were wearing naturals. Mrs. Mitchell was one I remember, and there were a few others that were wearing naturals. And, of course, that was quite phenomenal in the community, and people would just kind of looked at us. And we were basically politically organizing where we could. The Cleggs had a newspaper called the Illustrated News. Henry Clegg and his brother Albert B. Clegg and Richard Henry and Milton Henry were also involved with the Illustrated News. I was working at the post office at the time, and my good friend Kwame Atta, who was also working with me, we were also working with GOAL, the Group on Advanced Leadership, and we were trying to mobilize the community. It was a difficult task, but people were beginning to come around. People were asking questions. People wanted to hear any speaker that came to town, and they certainly wanted to hear this fiery young Muslim minister, Malcolm X. Shabazz. I think what we were trying to say to them at that time was that we needed to control the community in which we lived. It was kind of sad that we lived in a community where we did not control the social, economic, and political conditions of the community. We were surrounded by a white police force. We call them an army of occupation. We had hardly any blacks in any political offices in the city. We had no judges. We had one on the city council, a council of 9. We did not have elected officials in any numbers. We did not own a significant number of businesses as we felt we should. We did not control the social life in the city. We felt that we needed to control that and that it needed a black orientation. Well, Vaughn's bookstore was certainly something that was new in the community. There had not been a bookstore here before. And, of course, I got into the business because I was looking for a book called 100 Years of Lynchings by Ginsberg, and I was told downtown that they didn't have the book in stock. And I decided that I'd see if I could find it. And then when I found it, and my friends at the post office said that they'd like to read that and other black books. So I began to order them and sell them out of the trunk of my car. And then about 1962, I had opened Vaughn's bookstore, and we were beginning to sell books rather briskly. People were asking questions, and that was pretty much the mood around the bookstore. We were mainly oriented toward the people who already were Pan-Africanists and nationalists, or people who were on the left in the movement. And they came to the store, and soon school teachers, children began to come. There was sort of an awakening in the community. From New York, we were hearing about things happening there. I sold a magazine called The Liberator. We had the Afro-American Broadcasting Company, which was broadcasting every Saturday on WGPR, broadcasting the speeches of Malcolm X practically every Saturday. We had the Illustrated News newspaper, which the Clegg brothers put out, Albert and Henry. The Henry brothers were working with a group called Gold, and they also were responsible for the Afro-American Broadcasting System. Central Congregational Church, pastored by Albert Clegg, was beginning to make some movement in this particular area. So there was a great deal of consciousness taking place across the community. And that consciousness sort of came to bloom when people like Malcolm X would come to town, or Elijah Muhammad came. Usually it was Elijah who came, and Malcolm spoke before Elijah, and of course set the audience on fire. And that was really the mood of the times, and that was a great deal of change beginning to take place.
12th Street in the 60s was a very exciting place to be because they had clubs there, nightclubs, and they had restaurants, and they had shops that you could go to. It was like the Mecca had sort of shifted to 12th Street from Black Bottom, because at that particular time, Black Bottom was being, let's say, rebuilt. And so therefore a lot of merchants and a lot of places had moved to 12th Street. And we would go there for one place in particular was Klein Show Bar. It was a very nice club. I heard Yusuf Lateef there for the very first time, jazz, and there was another club directly across the street, and we would go, one of our friends was a saxophonist there. And I do remember that sometimes in the summer he would come off the stage and come out onto the street playing his horn, and it was just exciting. And we would go to there was a place, Hugh's Barbecue on 12th Street. They had the best barbecue in the city of Detroit. They had real good ice cream, and we would go there all the time. It was just an exciting place to be. The neighborhood was very nice. You weren't afraid to walk down the street. I was never afraid to be on 12th Street.
July was bringing America a wave of urban riots never before seen. The desperate cry of the poor of all races was demanding the nation's attention. No thoughtful person could deny that the immediate need for improved housing, health, education, employment opportunity, and hope for the future must receive affluent America's highest priority. The ghetto explosions gave new emphasis to administration efforts to expand its programs to meet those needs. The harsh reality was thrust on the Congress and the majority of the people of the extreme necessity to better the life of America's poor. No one believed that centuries-old inequities could be cured instantly. However, new and massive social rebuilding was becoming imperative. Of the 70 major riots to strike America during this troubled summer, the worst of the year and the nation's history would hit Michigan's largest city. Extremists and opportunists were perverting a just cause and protest. Violence and lawlessness became ends in themselves. On July 24th, for the first time in a quarter of a century, a state governor requested federal troops to put down a disorder beyond his control. Within hours, the president responded by sending 4,700 soldiers into the riot area. At midnight, as soldiers restored peace to the streets of America's fifth largest city, President Johnson addressed the nation.
In the early morning today, Governor Romney communicated with Attorney General Ramsey Clark and told him of the extreme disorder in Detroit, Michigan. The Attorney General kept me advised throughout the morning. At 10:56 this morning, I received a wire from Governor Romney officially requesting that federal troops be dispatched to Michigan. This wire had been sent at 10:46 a.m. At 11:02 a.m. this morning, I instructed the Secretary of Defense, Mr. McNamara, to initiate the movement of the troops which the governor had requested. At the same time, I advised the governor by telegram that the troops would be sent to Selfridge Air Base just northeast of Detroit and would be available to support and to assist the some 8,000 Michigan National Guardsmen and the several thousand state and local police under the command of Governor Romney and the mayor of Detroit. I informed the governor that these troops would arrive this afternoon. I also informed the governor that immediately Mr. Cyrus Vance, as Special Assistant to the Secretary of Defense and others, would proceed to Detroit for conferences with the governor and other appropriate officials. This plan proceeded precisely as scheduled. Approximately 5,000 federal troops were on their way by airlift to Detroit, Michigan within a few hours. Mr. Vance, General Throckmorton, and others were in Detroit and in conference with Governor Romney by the middle of this afternoon. Their initial report was that it then appeared that the situation might be controlled without bringing the federal troops from the Selfridge Air Force Base into downtown Detroit. They therefore recommended to the President that the troops be maintained on a 30-minute alert, and they advised that they would be in continual touch with the situation and with Secretary McNamara and me making periodic reports about every 30 minutes. At approximately 10:30 this evening, Mr. Vance and General Throckmorton reported to me by telephone that it was the then unanimous opinion of all of the state and federal officials who were in consultation, including Governor Romney, Mr. Vance, General Throckmorton, the mayor, and others, that the situation had developed in such a way in the few intervening hours as to make the use of federal troops to augment the police and Michigan National Guard imperative. They described the situation in considerable detail, including the violence and deaths that had occurred in the past few hours, and submitted as their unanimous judgment of all concerned that the situation was totally beyond the control of the local authorities. On the basis of this confirmation of the need for federal participation by federal troops, and pursuant to the official request made by the governor of the state of Michigan, in which Mayor Kavanaugh of Detroit joined, I forthwith issued the necessary proclamation and executive order as provided by the Constitution and the statutes. I advised Mr. Vance and General Throckmorton to proceed immediately with the transportation of federal troops from Selfridge Air Force Base to places of deployment within Detroit, a movement which they had already provisionally begun pursuant to their authority. I am sure that the American people will realize that I take this action with the greatest regret, and only because of the clear, the unmistakable, and the undisputed evidence that Governor Romney of Michigan and the local officials in Detroit have been unable to bring the situation under control. Law enforcement is a local matter. It is the responsibility of local officials and the governors of the respective states. The federal government should not intervene except in the most extraordinary circumstances. The fact of the matter, however, is that law and order have broken down in Detroit, Michigan. Pillage, looting, murder, and arson have nothing to do with civil rights. They are criminal conduct. And the federal government, in the circumstances here presented, had no alternative but to respond, since it was called upon by the governor of the state, and since it was presented with proof of his inability to restore order in Michigan. We will not tolerate lawlessness. We will not endure violence. It matters not by whom it is done or under what slogan or banner. It will not be tolerated. This nation will do whatever it is necessary to do to suppress and to punish those who engage in it. I know that with few exceptions, the people of Detroit and the people of Newark and the people of Harlem and of all of our American cities, however troubled they may be, deplore and condemn these criminal acts. I know that the vast majority of Negroes and whites are shocked and are outraged by them. So tonight, your president calls upon all of our people in all of our cities to join in a determined program to maintain law and order, to condemn and to combat lawlessness in all of its forms, and firmly to show by word and by deed that riots, looting, and public disorder will just not be tolerated. In particular, I call upon the people of the ravaged areas to return to their homes, to leave the streets, and to permit the authorities to restore quiet and order without further loss of life or property damage. Once this is done, attention can immediately be turned to the great and the urgent problems of repairing the damage that has been done. I appeal to every American in this grave hour to respond to this plea.
but he left one final warning.
1984 is, I believe, a quite terrifying masterpiece. So terrifying, in fact, I don't think I should like to read another like it.
I'm not absolutely dissatisfied with it. I think it is a good idea, but the execution would have been better if I had not been under the influence of TB when I wrote it.
You once claimed that you have an ability to face unpleasant facts. Is that what you demonstrated in 1984 by drawing an accurate portrait of the future?
I think that allowing for the book being, after all, a parody, something like 1984 could actually happen. This is the direction the world is going in at the present time. In our world, there will be no emotions except fear, rage, triumph and self-abasement. The sex instinct will be eradicated. We shall abolish the orgasm. There will be no loyalty except loyalty to the party. But always there will be the intoxication of power. Always, at every moment, there will be the thrill of victory, the sensation of trampling on an enemy who is helpless. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you.
This is Aldous Huxley, a man haunted by a vision of hell on earth. A serious social critic, Mr. Huxley, 27 years ago, wrote Brave New World, a novel that predicted that someday the entire world would live under a frightful dictatorship. Today, Mr. Huxley says that his fictional world of horror is probably just around the corner for all of us. We'll find out why in a moment. Good evening, I'm Mike Wallace. Tonight's guest, Aldous Huxley, is a man of letters, as disturbing as he is distinguished. Born in England, now a resident of California, Mr. Huxley has written some of the most electric novels and social criticism of this century. He's just finished a series of essays called Enemies of Freedom, in which he outlines and defines some of the threats to our freedom in the United States. And Mr. Huxley, right off the bat, let me ask you this. As you see it, who and what are the enemies of freedom here in the United States?
Well, I don't think you can say who in the United States. I don't think there are any sinister persons deliberately trying to rob people of their freedom. But I do think, first of all, that there are a number of impersonal forces which are pushing in the direction of less and less freedom. And I also think that there are a number of technological devices which anybody who wishes to use can use to accelerate this process of going away from freedom, of imposing control.
Well, what are these forces and these devices, Mr. Huxley?
I should say that there are two main impersonal forces. The first of them is not exceedingly important in the United States at the present time, though very important in other countries. This is the force which in general terms can be called overpopulation, the mounting pressure of population pressing upon existing resources. This, of course, is an extraordinary thing, something that's happening which has never happened in the world's history before. I mean, let's just take a simple fact that between the time of the birth of Christ and the landing of the Mayflower, the population of the Earth doubled. It rose from 250 million to probably 500 million. Today, the population of the Earth is rising at such a rate that it will double in half a century.
Well, why should overpopulation work to diminish our freedom?
Well, in a number of ways. I mean, the experts in the field, like Harrison Brown, for example, pointed out that in the underdeveloped countries, actually the standard of living is at present falling, that people have less to eat and less goods per capita than they had 50 years ago. And as the position of these countries, the economic position becomes more and more precarious, obviously the central government has to take over more and more responsibility for keeping the ship of state on an even keel. And then, of course, you're likely to get social unrest under such conditions, with again an intervention of the central government. So I think one sees here a pattern which seems to be pushing very strongly towards a totalitarian regime. And unfortunately, as in all these underdeveloped countries, the only highly organized political party is the Communist Party, it looks rather as though they will be the heirs to this unfortunate process, that they will step into the position of power.
Well, then, ironically enough, one of the greatest forces against communism in the world, the Catholic Church, according to your thesis, would seem to be pushing us directly into the hands of the communists because they are against their control.
Well, I think this strange paradox probably is true. It's an extraordinary situation, actually. I mean, one has to look at it, of course, from a biological point of view. The whole essence of biological life on Earth is a question of balance, and what we have done is to practice death control in a most intensive manner without balancing this with the birth control at the other end. Consequently, the birth rates remain as high as they were, and death rates have fallen substantially.
All right, then, so much for the time being anyway for overpopulation. Another force that is diminishing our freedoms.
Well, another force which I think is very strongly operative in this country is the force of what may be called over-organization. As technology becomes more and more complicated, it becomes necessary to have more and more elaborate organizations, more hierarchical organizations. And incidentally, the advance of technology has been accompanied by an advance in the science of organization. It's now possible to make organizations on a larger scale than was ever possible before. And so that you have more and more people living their lives out as subordinates in these hierarchical systems controlled by bureaucracies, either the bureaucracies of big business or the bureaucracies of big government.
Now, the devices that you were talking about, are there specific devices or methods of communication which diminish our freedoms in addition to overpopulation and over-organization?
Well, there are certainly devices which can be used in this way. I mean, let us take a piece of very recent and very painful history is the propaganda used by Hitler, which was incredibly effective. I mean, what were Hitler's methods? Hitler used terror on the one kind, brute force on the one hand, but he also used a very efficient form of propaganda, which he was using every modern device at that time. He didn't have TV, but he had the radio, which he used to the fullest extent, and was able to impose his will on an immense mass of people. I mean, the Germans were a highly educated people.
Well, we're aware of all this, but how do you equate Hitler's use of propaganda with the way that propaganda, if you will, is used, let us say, here in the United States? Are you suggesting that there's a paradox?
Needless to say, it's not being used in this way now, but the point is, it seems to me, that there are methods.
When you finally break it all down, it's the pride. It's the pride that caused a historically and genealogically inaccurate depiction of God in the flesh to be accepted worldwide. Pride is a sin. Sin has a consequence. It's the pride that caused slave catchers and militias to ride while the calloused, fleeing feet of anxious ancestors, stripped of their own self-awareness, history, and dignity, found that under the shadow of the wings of the Most High was the only place they could hide. It was also the pride that drove up the frozen fists as it simultaneously drove away droves of colored folk from their religious foundation. This foundation was more than a building. It was even more than just a spiritual temple. It was a place where a separated tribe could gather in order to simply commiserate. They came there to praise, worship, and glorify God, but also to relate to network, reconnect, and connect with each other, and to inform one another. It was a source of tradition and for provision, both material and spiritual. And these people needed it to soothe their troubled minds, and as fuel for their weary souls and spirits. They were divested and starved from the knowledge of centuries of vainglory and dynastic prowess by their oppressors. Yet, the Almighty Creator used this as a chance to feed His children the soul-nourishing bread of deliverance. Through the devilish and fiery trial of colonization, the Almighty Father, in His infinite wisdom, loosed them from the bondage of thousands of years of worshipping mischievous and deceiving spirits. They had been deceived and were foolishly convinced that they honored God by worshipping themselves in the form of their ancestors. The fallen, disguised as ancestral deities, gave mankind the practices that we call New Age as a means for man's self-destruction. Each practice is a way to cause for one to become an open vessel into which malevolent beings can easily enter. Worship of self is the ancient trick of the New Age, also called the Aquarian Age, which, in spite of its harmless-sounding name, will be the religion impressed upon the masses by the Luciferian elite. These so-called elite are sworn soldiers of Shaitan, and this brotherhood of Cain worships the same beings that the ancestors in Egypt, Babylon, and Sumer did. The obvious difference is that these beings actually do give the brotherhood actual control and power in this devilish world, while our conscious brothers and sisters incompetently attempt to recreate our former glory by using the history that was left available for us to learn from by our former oppressors. Through the carrying on of this tradition of deception, many of those who search for God today have been programmed to consider everything but the Scripture. Much has been done to give them apparently logical reasons to believe this way, while unfortunately, very little is done by the Bible-believing community at large to prevent this. Now that those generationally damaging quote-unquote things must be undone, all who witness the reawakening have a chance to be on the right side of history this time.
Yes, this is the ghetto, y'all. Showing up now. I'll put my hat
It's impossible. I can't be Jewish. How could it be?
That's what the scroll says, Fred.
Who ever heard of black Jews?
I did. Didn't you ever hear of Falashas?
Sure, Lola Falasha. She's one of my favorites. I'd like to invite her over here to see my scroll.
That's Falasha, not Falana. They're a group of blacks from Ethiopia that happen to be Jewish.
Well, I know they're blacks in Ethiopia, but where does that Jewish part fit in, and where does the crown come from?
Well, some people think the Falashas come from the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba.
Oh, King Solomon from the Bible. The guy who had an argument with those two mothers took their kids split.
Something like that, fool. I don't understand how the wisest of men beget the biggest turkey in Watts.
Kosher turkey. That's the biggest kosher turkey.
Now, wait a minute. Now, let me straighten this thing out. Now, you admitting I could be a king, right?
It's possible.
Well, I was right all along. Now all I have to decide is whether I like being Jewish.
Wait a minute, Pop. You're only a king if you admit that you're Jewish. If you decide you're not Jewish, then you're not a king.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Where have you been? I was so worried I got sick.
Now we even.
Pop, where have you been?
In the synagogue. Meet Sam Gittleman.
How are you? Can I get you something to eat or drink?
No, thanks. You're the son.
Yes, that's right. I'm the son.
Your father tells me you're a wonderful son.
That's nice.
And you're the friend. Yeah, I'm the friend. Your friend tells me you're a wonderful friend. That's nice. And you're the sister-in-law.
I'm the sister-in-law.
How do you do?
I see you two really got to know each other, didn't you?
Yeah, and you know what I found out?
Wait a minute, before you go making a fool out of yourself. We checked on that research company in Burbank, Research City. You're not a king. And you know you're not Jewish.
That's what I found out.
You did?
That's right. See, a lot of people were ripped off, and they came into Mr. Gittleman's store here, and he told me all about that phony company.
Well, you certainly seem to be taking it well.
I am, son. You see, I had a very good conversation with my friend, Mr. Gittleman, and here, for the first time, I learned that there are many philosophers living in New York City, and they got their own synagogue in Harlem.
That's right, and they are as truly black as they are Jewish.
And not only that, I learned that we have a lot in common with Jewish people. See, first of all, they were slaves too. I mean, in Egypt, 3,000 years ago.
I could have told you that, Fred. Or you could have learned it for yourself if you'd bothered to pick up a Bible.
Thank you, Esther, for your contribution to this religious discussion. Now, why don't you close your eyes in prayer and walk out there in the traffic?
You know, the Jews and blacks do have a lot in common. I hope their similarities will bring us closer together. I'm glad to meet you all. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Fred, good night.
Good night. You know, I like that old guy.
Yeah, I like the old guy, too.
You just met him.
No, I met you.
Sorry you're not a king, Fred.
Oh, that's all right, Bubba. It was great just being king for a day.
Yeah.
By the way, I learned that Bubba is a Yiddish word for grandmother.
No kidding, Fred?
No kidding, Grandma.
And did you learn that Esther was a Jewish queen? The most beautiful queen that ever was.
Well, somebody lied.